break it down. Okay, don't just assume that they say discuss the theories of organizational communication, and there you go. You just start talking about organizational communication. Most likely there's going to be a guide, or your lecturer will guide you on what exactly they want to see. So I think taking time to also analyze your questions is something very, very important, and we're definitely going to look into a little bit closer. Yeah, because I have found that students know the content. Students would have spent 2 weeks studying their content straight. They come to exams and then they struggle. So it's not that you don't know your work, you know your work, but now we haven't looked at the skill of analyzing questions. So when you get a question, you're not sure what aspect of everything you've studied for the past 2 weeks needs to come into this particular question. So that's something we're also going to be looking at. But maybe we'll pose it to you guys. Have you ever thought of this idea of analyzing your questions and breaking it down in the way that I've discussed? Absolutely. Thanks for that, Britt. Yes, so it's good to actually take that time. It may be tedious, but it really makes a world of difference if you've taken some time to just look at your question. Okay, so because this is something we will discuss later, I'm going to move on. So I'm getting quite excited here. So let's move on for the sake of time. Okay, so what is reading and what are texts? Because we've been talking about reading, and you're reading text and you're analyzing text, but what is all of this really? So when we discuss reading, we basically mean the process of engaging with the text, right? And this is what I've just alluded to already. So this can include viewing a movie is actually engaging with text, or reading a novel, or even looking at a picture. So text in this regard isn't just written text, right? In linguistics and in communications, we view everything from a picture is a piece of text, right? Music is a piece of text. Why? Because we can analyze it. We can analyze a picture. We have multimodal analysis where we look at pictures. There are whole theories about these things, right? So it's not just reading. So, okay, so as we engage with these texts, these different types of texts, we try to understand the meaning, and that is the core of it. We're trying to understand the meaning, and this is this process of analysis that we generally refer to as reading. So keeping thorough and accessible study notes is a very important part of reading text. I've highlighted this way too much now already. But yeah, just really key that as you read, to note down your findings, and these notes will be the basis of your response. And here I'm talking about your essay response, right? So your notes are basically going to form the foundation for this. So similarly, when we speak of text for English, yes, like I said, we mean a wide variety of text types. I've already mentioned some sort of broader text types, but what are some of the text types you've encountered? Maybe subcategories of what I've talked about. So we have different types of writing. We have fiction writing, non-fiction writing, academic writing, short stories. I'm actually just giving it out now. Short stories, we have graphic novels, we have comics. What else? Images I've mentioned, even plays are texts, right? When you go to the theater, I don't know if anyone actually goes to the theater anymore, but those can be considered text. What else? We have poems, we have TV series, websites are texts. And so each type of text basically requires a particular approach to reading it, right, or analyzing it. So you're not going to analyze a fiction book the same way you'll analyze your academic text, because they're essentially different types of text. Even though they're both written text, they are different genres. And so the ideas are going to come across very differently. They are using different mediums, and therefore they need to be analyzed and read very differently. So we're going to look at the process of reading and analyzing English text, and here we are focusing on specifically written text. Okay, so the process of reading and analyzing text, really, it's something that often gets taken for granted. I will say that. We know that now, we need to read our texts in order to understand them. We need to actively engage with our texts in order to understand them. And then we sort of have to take it a step further and have to translate our reading into a critical analysis of the text's meaning. And here we start delving into the meaning. We go beyond, oh, I understand what this text is trying to say. Oh, I understand the theory of mass media, or I understand the theory of organizational communication, or intercultural communication, multilingualism. I understand this concept. But now, can you go deeper to understand just the deep messages on a I'm going to say the word deeper again, just on a deeper level? So that's where we're wanting to move, right? We start from just reading, and then we're analyzing, and then we're having to translate critically. So at that point, a little bit of you starts coming into the analysis, right? It's not just what you're reading, it's what you interpret of what you're reading. But we will go through all the steps very briefly. And then, yeah, we'll have maybe a short discussion after about that all. And then you need to collate, or sort of put all this information together. So it's what you've taken from the theory itself, or the base content or text itself, as well as your interpretations, your critical analysis of it. You put it together, and you basically have to create this insightful analysis, and that is coming from your notes, or and we work with the assumption that at that point we would have made very effective notes that are going to help us in the long term. Okay, so this is just a brief guideline on ways to analyze text. I'm not saying this is the only way to analyze text. I'm not saying this is the preferred way to analyze text, but I'm giving us some sort of framework that we can start to position ourselves in, or start to think about. And you can tweak it as you see fit. I think all of us already sort of have a preferred style of studying, a preferred style of reading and analyzing. But I wanted to just present this and see if we can add another layer to our existing processes to make it just a tad bit more effective. Okay. So step one is off the bat, you get your, sorry, maybe I should pause and see if there are any questions. My throat is also getting very scratchy. So are there any questions or any comments at this point? Anything that, sort of came to your mind as we're talking about the process of analyzing text? Okay, Cecile says no. All right, I just want to maybe highlight something I mentioned at the start of the session, is that one of the differences between these sessions and tutorials is that I'm not assuming to know everything, right? So you know more about your module than I do because you are actively engaging with your content every day. I engage with the content on a very superficial level, on a very sort of top surface level, maybe that's the better word, because I am looking at about 10 modules in total, right? So the four second year comp sci modules, I can't delve into it as much as you guys are doing. So I say that to say that if there are things that I'm talking about that you find can actually relate to something you're talking about, or doesn't, to something you saw in your content, or it doesn't necessarily align, please do let me know. And also I say that because these sessions are meant to be facilitation, right? So I'm facilitating, I'm not necessarily teaching, I'm not supposed to be teaching. So I really, really will encourage you guys to be a little bit more active once you feel comfortable. I know this is still our first session and we don't know each other yet, but I am hoping that we get to a point where we can all learn from each other, because if there are maybe 3 students doing COM 2602, you guys will be able to really give insights and feedback that's going to help the other students in the class that are also doing your module. Or because we're all comp sci students, it's really going to help if you have any comments or any contributions to make. So I just wanted to say that we are co-constructing the learning in this space, okay? Okay, so back to step 1. And this is, I guess, the most simple, most straightforward step in the process, is that you need to read. You need to read the text uninterrupted. Just give yourself a good few pages and say, I'm going to read maybe topic 1 to 1.3, right? And I'm going to read it uninterrupted. That means the first read is you're just reading. You're just trying to get a sense of what this process is about. What this text is about. And sort of get a feel for it. Like, do you like it? Do you enjoy it? Do you understand it? Do you know what like the general theories are about? Even if you wouldn't be able to put the book down and explain it to someone, does it make some sort of sense in your head, right? So that's the first thing. You just want to sort of just read uninterrupted. And then you can go in and write initial observation and feelings about the text. So what you were thinking about when you were reading. And at this point, remember, it's your first time engaging with this text. So you're not going to have any really deep insights. Unless you're that person, which is great. But usually I'm just a very regular person. So I'm not going to have any very special insights after I've just read something the first time. I'll have a very surface level insights about it, but even those insights are important, right? Because I'm already starting to think about it, even maybe not very deeply, but I'm thinking about it, and so I can put those thoughts down already, those initial thoughts. It may not be right, but it's just to, I think, also get into the habit of putting down thoughts as you're reading. Right, so once you sort of put down your initial thoughts, you go and you read it a second time. Okay, so this is this part or the step that we usually don't do because it takes time, truthfully. And I know this, and it's a bit of a pain if you're having to read a text a second time, but it really is important because the second time, it's almost like, okay, maybe it's not the same thing, but I was thinking of when I watch a really good movie. The first time I really enjoy it. The second time I absolutely love it because I already know the plot by the second time, right? Okay, I know what's going to happen. I know who's going to die. I know how they're going to die. So those things won't surprise me anymore. Now, the second time I'm watching a movie, I start seeing the Easter eggs. I'm like, oh, so this links up to what's actually going to happen. Oh, so this was already predicted, right? You already have a foresight about the text. So when you're going in, you're able to see a little bit deeper. That's what's happening at the second time you're reading. There are not going to be any surprises in terms of what is this theory about, or what is intercultural communication about. You have an idea already, but as you go in, the second time, you begin to make links, and that's the important part, right? Once you're able to make links, it's like something in your brain is just starting to connect, and it's beautiful. Sorry, I'm really geeking out about this. I hope that I'm not the only excited one here. Okay, so that's our second read. And again here, you're making notes. Now, of course, your notes are going to be a little bit more meaningful, right? Because now you can, those deeper things that you picked up, the deeper insight, you're able to put those down, and it's like you've added a second layer. So if you just think about the movie example, it's like the first time you told your friend, oh, this movie, this is what happened. The next time you tell your friend, you watch it, you tell your friend, oh, you know what, I noticed that the girl, when she said this, she was actually predicting, you know, it's just a little bit deeper. So at that point, you're understanding the text much better already by that point. And we're only on step 1. So can you imagine what's going to happen at the end of these steps? How well you will actually know this content and how well you'll be able to interpret and discuss it, right? It's going to be second nature to you. All right. So step 2 is the making notes, and it did form part of step 1 already, right? But yes, so step 2 is really, like we said, the first read is about getting that broad understanding of the text. So, you know, if it's a movie, you get a sense of what the plot is, or if it's a fiction movie, or fiction book, or if it's just a typical university textbook, you get a sense of the theories, the approaches, the principles of communication. You get a sense and you get an idea of that, right? Very broad understanding. And then the second reading is what I've just talked about already. So again, they feed into each other. So your step 1 is essentially your reading once, reading twice. Your step 2 filters into your step 1 is that when you do your first reading, you write your first set of notes. When you do your second reading, you write your second set of notes. Okay, so in your second reading set of notes, okay, yes, I have talked about this. So you've developed now a deeper understanding of the core ideas, of the character development. You know what's going to happen. And here you're able to pull out examples, like I said, right? You're able to pull out examples that you underlined or highlighted in your text. If we think about the movie, this is where you're able to pull out those Easter eggs and say, this is how I knew this was going to happen. Oh, now I see why this was happening. It was, you know, leading up to that. So you're pulling examples, and the examples are going to form a very important part of your essay writing at the end, because what do we need to firm up our arguments and to firm up our discussions? We need examples, right? So already here you see how you're building some sort of structure, right? So you at this point now you have examples. You can motivate, right, why this is and why that is not. So if we think about it in sort of the material that you are engaging in, most likely is just a typical textbook. They will say the principles of organizational communication are so and so and so, and they'll give you like a brief definition. They'll maybe give you examples. Those examples you can either take as they are, or you can think about the definition and then form your own examples based on their examples. It's quite easy. You sort of just replace certain factors or elements in the example, as long as you're staying true to the core example, then you will ensure that you're not deviating from the true meaning of that particular text. Okay, so we've read it a second time now. We have examples, and then we're doing a third reading. So at step 2 is we do a third reading. And here now you're really making very detailed notes about the ideas that you're seeing, right? What are the central ideas? What are the themes that you're noticing in this reading? So as I said, and as I've been reiterating, you must make notes as you go along. You know, you need to keep track of the insights, and that is how you are engaging with your text, right? So we've looked at how to start organizing your ideas, but sometimes it is difficult to know what ideas are worthwhile, especially at the beginning, and especially when you have a lot to get through, right? So I'm working with the knowledge that a textbook is very long, a study guide can be very long. So it can be a bit tricky to decide like what you want to include or what you don't want to include. But that is on you. I think it's part of the analysis process where you actually need to start making those executive decisions yourself, right, about what's important and what's not important. And that is what we call also critical analysis, because everything may be important, but you can't make notes of everything, because then you're just rewriting the book, and that's not very time efficient. So it's at this point you're taking it a step further, and you're saying, now I'm going to decide what I'm going to include, what I'm not going to include, what I think is relevant or is necessary, and what isn't. And a good way to also guide you is if you have like something like a tutorial letter, where you can see what the learning outcomes are, because that can help you to know what is important for you to pick out of your text. Okay, so I'm going to move on swiftly to step 3, and this is a bit of an intense one depending on the type of text that we are reading, right? So once you have sort of understood the general idea, you've gotten examples, and you've pulled out some ideas, we start thinking about the text itself and what the text is trying to do, right? What is the text that you're looking at trying to do? What is the beyond the meanings, like what is its composition? Because it's not just about the content sometimes, right? Sometimes it's not just the content, it's also how the content has been framed. So as part of our analysis, we have to look at that, right? We can't just look at what's happening. And if I go back to the analogy of the movie, you can't just look at the plot, right? You're also listening to the music. How is the music setting the scene, the tone for a particular scene? You look at color, you look at wardrobe. I don't know if you guys look at all of that, but I look at all that stuff, because all of that is going to give me a full picture about this text, right, or this movie. So if I'm just looking at the plot, I might lose out a lot of the other stuff, right, the other hidden messages. And that's another thing with text analysis, is what we're trying to do is go deeper to find some hidden messages that might be there. Okay, so I think before I go into step 3, our regional coordinator, Adele, is in the room, has joined us. Welcome, Adele. And she has posted a link in the chat. And the link will take you to the main schedule for all the sessions we offer. So remember, I mentioned that a bit earlier in our session, that you will be able to access and see all the sessions that we do offer, and see if there's any other one that you are interested in joining and attending. So yeah, please try to test the link and let us know if you get to the schedule or to the page where you can see all the schedules, all the sessions. Okay, thanks for that, Adele. I'm losing my voice here a little bit, so I think I'm going to give us maybe 2 minutes to try that link out. So if everyone can maybe just click on that link, and we'll take a 2 to 3 minute break while we do that. Okay. Okay, have you guys managed to access the link? Can I maybe get a thumbs up in the chat, or yes, just to know that some of us or all of us or one of us has maybe seen the schedule? Okay, Shalami is saying it's taking time to load. Everyone else is saying yes. Okay. It might maybe just be your network, Shalami. I don't know.
Hi.
Hi.
To the ones that are saying yes, are they saying that they are able to get into the schedule? Because we want to know that. Once they open the link, are they able to get into the schedule?
I think so, Dima. But see, some people are still typing. So.
Okay, sister still saying yes. Maybe it's yes to that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Yeah, from my side, I was also able to get in and see the schedule and click on join.
That's great then. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, great. So I think we're back. I mean, we didn't go anywhere, but we are back, and we're going to continue with step 3. From here, it gets a little bit heavier. And this is a step that is definitely more optional, especially I think if you've done step 1 and 2 very well. You've set yourself up for success already. You've built a good base for your essay writing, or just for a great understanding of your content. Step 3 really depends on the type of content you're working with, and you'll see as we go through the factors or the elements. But yes, I'll maybe just go through it quickly because this is more of an optional step. This is not something I necessarily do with academic texts, except if I am writing, for example, a literature review or book review, then I would look at all these particular things, but it is good to have it at the back of your mind. Okay, so often understanding the general theme or the general gist of your content is important, right? But also understanding the ideas that it's trying to convey all together. Like I said, with the movie, how is it trying to, what broader message or theme is it trying to communicate if we look at the plot, but we also look at the music, and we look at the costume design, and we look at the colors. You know, there's this bigger message that is trying to be portrayed. So often we refer to ideas or themes because they are common to a number of texts, but also genres or selection of art or literature, right? So a certain genre will tell you already has a certain theme, right? So if you're watching a comedy, if you're watching a movie and there's lots of laughter and lots of jokes, and like, you already know that the genre that's a comedy, right? You sort of know how to frame it already. So that's the same with written text. Knowing the genre of the text you're studying will give you a hint about the kind of themes that you're looking for. And this is particularly good if you are having to write an essay where they ask you to like draw out common themes or discuss the key themes of this particular theory or this particular approach, right? If you know the general genre, it should be a bit easier to do that. So what are some of the things that we need to consider when we're looking to identify themes from our text? We consider purpose or the context. We consider the author's positioning, the topic and framing, the research or sources, proof or evidence, and organization and style. So I'm going to just maybe briefly go through them. So with the purpose and context, I think that is usually the first thing we look at. The purpose, you just ask yourself, okay, what is this about? Once you open your COM 2603 textbook, what's the first chapter about? It will usually have a topic title, right? So already you get the sense of this is what's about. In other words, what content does it attempt to explain or to cover? What type of text is it? So that is like under what discipline or field, but you will already have this information because you are studying this, you are a student of this, you know what the topic is about, you know what the discipline, you know where it fits in, right? That's why I say this step is a lot of things that we'll probably already know. And what overall purpose does the text serve? So for example, is it trying to answer a question? Is it trying to pose a problem? Is it trying to add to research? Is it introducing a new idea? Is it summarizing someone else's idea? Is it just explaining a concept or theory, which is most of what we will be dealing with, right, in our studies? Most of the text is trying to explain concepts and theories to us. So it's trying to give not necessarily new information, but it's trying to communicate some information that will be new to us. In other writing, the author's positioning becomes important. So you start to think about who are the authors of the text. Is any biographical information given about them? What qualifies them to write on this subject? Are the authors present in the text through the use of personal pronouns or self-reference, or are they never referred to? So this also gives you a framing of how to understand the text. I mean, again, not necessarily compulsory, but sometimes when you read a piece of writing, and I think this especially on social media, because we also analyze digital text, right? On social media or online, you have to look at who wrote this, because that speaks to validity, right? Credibility, sorry. So if you come across an article on the importance of organizational communication in businesses, and you see the authors maybe a first-year student or just some average Joe, sorry, I think we're all average Joes, but you know, maybe it's someone that you don't particularly think is very qualified. If it's a first-year student, yes, maybe they wrote a good article, but how credible is that? Because you are going to almost unconsciously ask yourself, can I believe what this person has written? What is this based on? And so it is important to think about the author who has written about it, but not necessarily super important, right? But just, are they qualified to write on it? Because if you're wanting, and this is going back to our essay writing, if you're wanting to quote from that particular author, you need to ensure that they are qualified to write about that thing. Otherwise, it makes your writing non-credible because you're quoting sources that are non-credible. And this is why our higher education institutions tell us to not quote from Wikipedia, because we can't confirm who's writing those articles, right? Even if the information is correct, we're not going to quote them because there's just no credibility there, right? So we'd rather go to a more credible site with a more credible author who is saying the same thing and quote that guy, because that gives our writing also credibility. So it becomes important more in terms of the referencing and making sure that you're quoting credible sources. Okay, the next one is we start thinking about audience. Okay, so I don't have audience on the slide, but I have it in my notes. So audience, I think that goes without saying that it is important to think about where the text appears. Again, in the example about that article, if it's on some random blog online, you also start thinking about credibility. You start already thinking that this is for everyone, it's for the general public. But if you find something that's in an academic journal, you know that this is for the academic community, the scientific research community. It is credible, it has been peer reviewed, and it is for a particular audience, right? It's not just for everyone. Of course, everyone can read it, but usually, if we even think of the nature of academic texts, they're not really easy to find, right? Like prescribed textbooks, we usually have to buy them. Usually just have to buy them. Journal articles, also, many of them you have to pay for them. So it also gives you a sense of who they're writing for, who their audience are. So yes, are they well versed in the topic? For example, your journal articles, they're not writing for everyone, they're writing for people in that particular field. So they're going to use language that is very specific. They're going to use jargon that not the everyday person would know. But they know that their audience, their intended audience, will understand it. But those same people can also write an article for the general public, and that article they're going to write it very differently to the way that they would write their journal articles, right? Because they're keeping in mind the audience, who is going to read this, who is this accessible to, right? So that's just a bit about the audience. I'm going to maybe briskly go through topic and position. Again, I think with a topic, it's quite easy in your context in terms of your textbooks and your study guides. The topic will be very clear. It will usually be, you'll have your headings, your subheadings, and you'll know when there's a shift or a change in topic. So this is not something that you necessarily have to think too much about. The research or sources is very important, especially if you're thinking of quoting. And here we move beyond just your textbook and study guide. Excuse me, but we move to when you start doing other research, right? When you start, what's the word? When you start referring to other sources, because your essay is not just going to be based on what you read in your textbooks, right? You're also going to have to do additional reading and find additional sources to strengthen your arguments. So those resources, you need to think about the credibility of those resources, right? And how relevant they are to your topic. Yeah, and do they warrant discussion? Are they, yeah. So basically, it's just important to also note your sources. And proof or evidence, this goes without saying. I remember in step 2, we talked about when you've done your second reading of the text, you start picking up examples, right? So this is going to be your proof or your evidence of your point, or whatever you're discussing, you'd be able to pull examples or pull evidence from the base text. And again, you're not restricted only to the content of your study guide or of your textbook. If you find a journal article that has some really strong proof or evidence of the point you're trying to make, you're able to bring that in. But it's important that that is credible. I think I'm going to also maybe stress that, the credibility of the sources, the credibility of the proof, and how relevant it is to your topic, right? So if you're talking about something like the theories of, I can't think of a very good example right now. But if you think about something maybe like language learning, right? There are different theories to language learning. But now you talk about language learning, and then you bring in and you say 85% of students found that doing this subject was very difficult. That isn't very relevant to what you're discussing, right? So just making sure that all the evidence that you are inserting is relevant to what you are discussing. And then organization and style. Again, I think this comes in a lot more in like fiction writing and more creative writing. But generally in our more textbook examples, the organization is quite straightforward, quite simple. You have a heading, you have a subheading, you have a paragraph or two paragraphs, you have another heading, and it sort of feeds into each other. Or you have an example block, or you have an activity block, and that feeds into each other. And then the style, of course, we're just talking about, is it more formal writing? Is it informal? Are there very technical terms? Are the technical terms explained? Is there a special box where the writer has actually says, like a glossary block? Yeah, a glossary block. Yeah, you just think about the style. It's quite simple in our textbooks. The style is quite straightforward. It is quite clear. There usually are examples because of point number one, which is the purpose of our writing, right? If the purpose of the writing is to communicate an idea or to explain something, then that is going to be reflected in the style. So I'll bring it back to you. And when you are writing your essays, and we will go a lot deeper into this, but I want us to see that all of this is connected, right? They don't live in isolation. So when you're writing your essay, you need to think about the style, and the style you use is dependent on the purpose of your essay. So if your essay is to discuss or to argue, your writing style needs to fit the purpose of the essay, right? If the purpose of your essay is to narrate, I can already say it's going to be a more a reflective piece. There's going to be a lot of pronouns. You can say I and we because you're narrating a story, right? So your style will change. But if you're arguing a point, there's no space for I think and I feel, because that's not what an academic argument is about. It's not about your feelings. It's about your thoughts, but you need to frame it in a way that it doesn't sound like it's personal, right? It's like, oh, the research says this, so you start arguing your point without putting yourself into it. But we will talk about that at a later stage. Okay, just key to notice, one of the other things as you're writing your essay, does my style coincide with the purpose of my essay? Okay, so that was step 3 in a nutshell. And then finally is when you start looking at drawing up conclusions, it's good to sort of use the results of your analysis. So you have done now a full-on analysis, whether you would have done step 3 or not, or maybe you would have just thought about step 3. The fact is you would have done a full-on analysis, and now you use the results of your analysis, right? You use all your notes and you put them together, and this is going to help you to answer your essay question, or to answer your essay question essentially. So of course this is not sort of the end all and be all of your analysis, but you would have given yourself a good start, right? And you will always go back to review. Review is also very important in your analysis, in reading, in writing your essays. So you'll review what you've wrote. You'll see, oh, maybe that was, I don't think that was the key point. Let me go back and just fix that. Because now you have such a greater understanding of your topic that you'll be able to see cracks in your own initial insights, right? You'll be able to see, how does this compare to what I've been reading, because you've been now reading a lot. How does my analysis compare to the base text? Does it still say the same thing, or have I taken away from the core message? And if you are writing for publication, which at this point we're not, but you start thinking about, yeah, not even just for publications, actually, you need to start thinking about the conventions that you're going to use. You know, have you referenced in the right format? You know, so if your lecturer asked for APA referencing style, have you used that? Or if they asked for Harvard, have you used that? Have you ensured you've got the proper genre? Have you ensured that you're using the right vocabulary for this field, right? Communication science has its own vocabulary to maybe everyday life or to the web design guys, right? So are you using the right vocab, and does it fit within the field that you're writing in? Okay, so that's just as you're wrapping up your analysis, just like a few final or parting thoughts that you need to start having. Step 4, I would say, again, it's a lot of what we've done already. So I wouldn't necessarily spend too much time on this step, but it's again going back to the point of finding examples and techniques, all of this just to build your analysis, to build your argument. So yes, I think at this point it's more about just being aware of the wide variety of text types that there are and the various applications. So we are working within, I think we're quite lucky because we're working within one particular framework, right? So we're working with academic texts, we're working in a particular kind of a restricted framework, so we don't need to think about different types of text and different applications. We just need to master this one. And I think once we get it, it'll be, a step in the right direction, because this tends to be the hardest, actually. So once you get this, you can get a lot of other things, because the principles do remain the same. Okay, so here the step is just to reinforce the themes that you've selected again. And then step 5, this also really depends on your style, the type of learner the type of student you are, what you prefer to do with your results or with your sort of final findings. They recommend that you use a table, that you tabulate your notes. So sort of initial reading, initial insights about content, topic, structure, framing, put that in a table. Second reading, put that in a table. So the principle behind making tables is to extract the relevant information from text and place it in an easy to access document. But we know that there are other ways of doing this, and so this step is very relative. It depends on what works for you, but I think the core thing to take from this is that you need to place your notes or display your notes in a way that will make it easy for yourself. Because what I find is if I write my notes as if I'm writing a book, I'm not going to be very interested to going back to it, to review it. I'm also not going to be able to find what I need because I've just written out everything like linearly, right? So I like to maybe color code so that I know if I'm looking for content on approaches to language learning, I know that's color code yellow. I can quickly go to my book and just look for yellow, right? So it's just about how can you make it easier for yourself to find your notes, because there's nothing worse than making really, really good notes and then because it's in not an unreadable state, but because it's in a difficult to find state, you don't end up going back to it. And I mean, you would have spent so much time making those notes. you want to be able to go back to it and find things easily. Okay. So that is it. I did want us to do an exercise, but I think we'll leave it for next week. So we will actually just touch on and actually try to apply some of the things that we have talked about today, because there's a lot of talking today. So next week we are going to try and apply and really see how we can go about trying to analyze this in class. So we're gonna we'll have a text that we're gonna analyze together. We'll come back and we'll discuss it. Okay, so I'm just gonna close up. In closing, today we talked about reading and comprehension and text analysis. So reading with comprehension and summarizing. These are key skills needed to help in identifying important concepts and to fully grasp the content you're dealing with. So although all our modules are characterized by different theories, different content, it's all based on the foundational principles around communication science. Oh, my voice. So once we read through and understand the foundations of these core theories, it'll really go a long way in ensuring greater understanding and application of the theories and the content that we're going to be working with. So the key thing to highlight here that I want to leave with you is that time is important, right? You need to give yourself the time to read thoroughly and to take your notes so that when you reach the end of the chapter, take the time to work through the questions if there are questions in your study book. So usually rushing the studying and rushing your reading is what robs us from understanding, and we really want to understand, because that is what is going to help us not just retain the information but be able to apply it come exam and assignment time. So I mean, ultimately I think I want to challenge you to invest more time in engaging with your material. We're not too far out in the semester, so we can still maybe plot out your time and see, even if you don't follow all the steps that we've done, right? I think step 1 and 2 is key if you want a truly deep understanding of your content, and if we are truly going to move away from this idea of reading to answer, right? And that is key for me. If we can leave or end the semester knowing that the information that we dealt with, we engaged with, we truly engaged with it, and we'll be able to bring it up in conversation, and we'll be able to apply it even to our everyday lives. I think it's so great when students are able to take things that they're learning in class and be able to see it in their real lives, right? And communication is all around us. Mass communication is all around us. Organizational communication is all around us. Intercultural communication is all around us. So the topics are not boring. You know, this is not stats. Sorry if there are any stats people here. I don't think stats is very interesting. So our subject topics are very interesting, and it will just be so amazing if we can really take more than just good marks out of the semester. Of course, I want you all to have great marks, and I believe that you'll all get great marks. But beyond that, we are trying to really ensure that we have graduates and students that are able to really use the information and use the knowledge to make a difference in their world, or even to just have a better understanding of their world, you know? So yes, that's it from me. Are there any, I know it's been a very long session today, but are there any questions or any comments or anything that you'd like us to maybe touch on a little bit more in the next session? Because I know today I had to cover quite a lot. Yeah, so if there isn't anything, I'll just leave my it was in the other, I'll just leave my email address in the chat, so that if you do want to maybe email me if you can't think of anything now, or if you find yourself watching the recording later and you realize that there's something that I mentioned that you do want to talk about, you're welcome to email me. We can have a chat, or once the consultation sessions are set up, we can also just have a consultation about that. Let me quickly find this email address for you guys. I'll pop it in the chat because I think that might help. Okay, in the next session, we are going to do some practical applications of what we have talked about today. So like I said, there was a lot of things, sort of steps thrown in, there are lots of information, and even my voice is telling me I've like reached my limit, my talking limits for today. So next week we're going to apply. So we're going to actually practice what we have learned today. We're going to do a mock text analysis. So either you can come with your own piece of text from your modules, or I can provide us a sample text that you can analyze. So we'll do that, and then we'll go into the essay, how that falls into our essay planning and the structure of the essay and just important things around that. Okay. Okay, so for those who joined us late, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to sign the attendance register. I'm just going to pop it in the chat again. So if you haven't just fill that in, please do so now. And if there isn't anything else, I'll wish you a lovely, lovely Tuesday evening. Rest well. Tomorrow's a public holiday, so I am looking forward to sleeping in a little, and I hope you will too. And I will see you next week. Also, I think if you can maybe bookmark the session that Adele posted with the schedule, that will also help you to access the sessions a bit easier so that you don't always have to look through your emails, because that's just a quick join. Okay, thank you. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.